Are you in a relationship where it feels like you do all the mental work, keeping things balanced and connected? Is emotional intimacy 100% your job, while the other person frequently sabotages your feelings of safety? And do you often feel dismissed or disregarded, even as you're the one partner holding things together? This isn't just emotional exhaustion. This is codependency, and it's deeply wired into your brain and your nervous system. It's not just about what you do in the relationship. It's about why you do it and how your brain has learned to equate love with emotional labor and anxiety. Now, at a neurobiological level, codependency is not just a bad habit. It's a conditioned response that keeps your brain locked in a reward and punishment loop. Here's how it works. Your nervous system has been trained to equate emotional instability with love. If your early experiences with attachment were inconsistent, your limbic system, that part of your brain responsible for emotional processing, wired itself to expect relationships to feel like a roller coaster. Stability feels foreign to you. Now, every time your partner pulls away, your brain interprets it as a survival threat. The amygdala, your brain's fear center, activates, releasing stress hormones like cortisol and adrenaline, putting you in a heightened state of panic. This is why you feel anxious, obsessive, and desperate to fix things. Now, when you do fix the relationship, your brain rewards you. The moment you reestablish connection, whether through people-pleasing, over-functioning, or self-sacrificing, you get a dopamine hit. This temporary relief reinforces that behavior, making you even more likely to chase that reassurance in the future. And usually your partner rewards you maybe with an oxytocin blast as well, where you feel really connected. It's not just the dopamine piece. It's the oxytocin and the GABA and feeling safe and having low cortisol. It's I overextended myself and now feel safe and I get all those rewards. This was a good thing. I should do this again. Over time, this pattern rewires your brain to seek love through struggle. The more that you repeat this cycle, the stronger these neural pathways become. Now, eventually you stop feeling secure unless there's something to fix. Your identity becomes tied to emotional caregiving, and your self-worth depends on how much you can prove your value in the relationship. This is why setting boundaries feels terrifying. It's not just a relationship issue, it's a biochemical withdrawal. Your body and brain have been conditioned to crave the dopamine rush and the oxytocin and GABA rush that comes from saving the relationship over and over, even at the cost of your own mental health. Maybe especially at the cost of your own mental health. That's the proof. If you stay in this cycle long enough, your prefrontal cortex, the part of your brain responsible for rational thinking and self-awareness, starts to lose control over the fear-driven emotional responses of your limbic system. Now, this leads to a couple of things you need to know about. Number one is a hypervigilance in your relationships, constantly scanning for signs that your partner is pulling away. Also, a diminished sense of self, prioritizing their needs so much that you no longer know what you even need. Emotional dysregulation, where you're feeling on edge, reactive, completely numb when things don't go as expected. And reinforced low self-worth, internalizing that belief that love must be earned through suffering. And the very worst part is if you don't break this pattern, you won't just repeat it with this partner. You'll carry it into every relationship that you have. This is why simply trying harder won't fix codependency. You have to retrain your brain and nervous system, feel safe in relationships without relying on crisis, chaos, or emotional labor. Suffering, struggling, proving your love by martyring yourself. The 7 steps I'm about to walk you through in this video are designed to rewire your attachment system, to regulate your nervous system, and shift your entire perception of love and self-worth. When you take these steps, here's what's going to change. First benefit is that your nervous system will no longer react to distance as a survival threat, meaning that you won't spiral into panic every time your partner pulls away. Second one is that your brain will stop associating love with struggle, making you attracted to partners who meet you halfway rather than those who need saving. If you've ever wondered how to stop chasing the partners who are bad for you, this is going to do that. Your sense of self-worth is also going to strengthen so that you stop over-functioning, over-explaining, or abandoning yourself just to maintain connection. And your ability to set boundaries will increase a lot because you'll no longer fear that advocating for your needs means losing the relationship. All of this, it's not just about fixing your relationship. I have plenty of videos on fixing relationships. This video is about rewiring the way you experience love so that it no longer drains you or destabilizes you or keeps you trapped in survival mode. So let's get into it. Here are the exact 7 steps to breaking free from emotional codependency for good. Codependency is more than just a pattern of unhealthy relationship dynamics. It's a survival mechanism that becomes hardwired into your brain. The term codependent originally described relationships where one person enabled another's destructive patterns, usually in the cases of addiction. With alcohol treatment, you would have the substance-dependent person, the dependent, and then a codependent who helped that person in their ongoing addiction. That person could not continue being addicted because of all the consequences in their life unless their codependent was enabling that life and helping them not hit rock bottom. The addiction was only possible because the codependent was facilitating it, making life too easy. Over time, this term, codependent, has expanded to include any relationship where one person's emotional stability becomes overly dependent on the dysfunction of the other person, where the codependent needs to be caring for the other person's emotions and their instability. In an anxious and avoidant relationship, codependence is often reinforced at a neurochemical level, creating that cycle that feels nearly impossible to escape from. Every partner's attachment system triggers distinct hormonal and neurotransmitter responses that keep them locked in place. The anxious partner's brain craves oxytocin and dopamine. Their nervous system is wired to seek connection, validation, and emotional closeness. When the avoidant partner is engaged and responsive with them, their brain releases dopamine, the reward chemical, and says, "This was good," and oxytocin, the bonding hormone that says, "I am loved," creating a temporary sense of security and euphoria from that connection moment. But the avoidant partner experiences relief through cortisol reduction when they withdraw. Their attachment system interprets too much emotional closeness as overwhelming, which triggers a spike in cortisol, the stress hormone, so that when they pull away, their nervous system calms down, and that reinforces avoidance as a coping mechanism. This push and pull dynamic creates an intermittent reinforcement. It's a powerful conditioning effect often seen in addiction cycles. The anxious partner chases that dopamine and oxytocin hit when they feel neglected to get rewarded, and the avoidant partner retreats to maintain emotional equilibrium. The more this cycle repeats, and then reinforces both of them, the deeper it becomes ingrained in their neurobiology and becomes their constant pattern. Now remember, they've been doing this since they were children. They did it in other relationships. Now they're also doing it here. So it's been reinforced sometimes for decades by the time they get together and then build this pattern and reinforce it again. Now, here is why this cycle feels impossible to break. The anxious partner becomes chemically addicted to those emotional highs and lows. Every time their partner re-engages with them after a low, their brain releases that surge of dopamine, oxytocin, and sometimes serotonin, that contentment mood stabilizer, which creates a temporary emotional high. This is why they keep pursuing closeness, even when the relationship is painful. As a quick aside, this information might feel surprising for many of you who've been on this channel for a long time. You might be asking, "Adam, are you sure the anxious person also has an addiction to chasing dopamine?" Well, sort of. Dopamine is really meant to be a signal that says, "This felt good. Do this again in the future." For the anxious person, that's linked to the oxytocin release and the behaviors that they did. And the oxytocin may get reinforced and reinforce further the feeling of safety. That means the dopamine burst makes them feel pleasure and safety with the oxytocin release. That makes them feel desire to hit even more than the oxytocin itself already does. And yes, this means the anxious person is addicted to the dopamine behaviors. So yes, the anxious person is also at times chasing dopamine, but not as purely as the avoidant partner is chasing dopamine. Let's talk about that. The avoidant partner, meanwhile, reinforces their emotional numbing response. When they feel high cortisol from closeness and withdraw, they feel relief from the cortisol spikes. Their brain registers emotional distance as the safest option. They also usually retreat and then do some dopamine binging on the side, which may link together with this effect. They are chasing dopamine in other ways, but it's linked up. Reduction in cortisol, increase in dopamine. Sometimes they pull away in order to do the dopamine binging without you overseeing them. Over time, all of this together suppresses their ability to access deeper feelings of connection with you. Both partners in this cycle experience nervous system dysregulation. The anxious partner goes up and down, into sympathetic, out of it, in, out, but it's entirely dependent on energy and attention and focus from the other person. They are externally focused for their reward, so they need to get it with approval, with doing things for them, giving and overperforming to try to get that hit. Okay? They're in and out of their sympathetic nervous system because of that. The avoidant partner is always active in their sympathetic nervous system and can't get out of it unless they withdraw and pull away. They emotionally numb themselves to avoid that overwhelm. All of this is why simply trying to fix behaviors isn't going to work. Breaking free from this codependency requires rewiring how the brain perceives love, security, and emotional closeness at a biological level. So now you understand. Now we can go through the 7 exact steps that will help you reset your nervous system, reclaim emotional balance, and finally break this cycle for good. Step 1. Identify the codependent patterns in your relationship. Without awareness, nothing else can happen. The neuroscience of codependency that we've discussed so far shows that it feels like love because it triggers dopamine and oxytocin, creating a powerful neurochemical bond between the partners. The anxious partner experiences surges of these bonding hormones and neurotransmitters when their partner engages, reinforcing the belief that emotional caretaking equals connection. The avoidant partner, on the other hand, has learned to regulate stress by withdrawing, often experiencing relief through the suppression of cortisol and adrenaline when they distance themselves, and then binging dopamine somewhere else. The problem with this cycle, one big problem, is that it hijacks the brain's reward system. The anxious partner keeps giving more to chase the oxytocin and the dopamine high, while the avoidant partner maintains distance to stay in emotional equilibrium. Awareness is the first part of fixing this issue so that you can recognize when you're doing the damaging behaviors. Here's a couple ways you can become more aware of this cycle. Number 1, start tracking your own behaviors and emotional states in response to your partner's actions. Sometimes I have my clients write down a list, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and then put little X's on the days when they feel an overwhelm, an emotional disconnect, a fear, an urgency to caretake, or an urgency to seek approval. Just put a little X and start tracking how many of these you experience. Number 2, notice how your mood rises and falls based on their engagement or withdrawal. This is a sign of neurological reinforcement. Start running that through your head. If you have that, maybe you track it on an app, maybe you track it in a phone somewhere, but keep track. How many times did my mood get impacted by their behavior? Number 3, become aware of when your brain rewards dysfunction. Understand this is the first step to dismantle it. When you feel good, ask yourself why. Often you're going to find in this cycle, it's because you did something reassuring and soothing that's probably overperforming and emotionally exhausting yourself at the expense of you to try to build this connection again. You're rewarding yourself for self-destruction, most likely. Step number 2, recognize the chemical and psychological hooks that are keeping you stuck. This cycle of anxiety, withdrawal, and temporary reconnection is identical to addiction pathways in the brain. Dopamine surges in the anxious partner when an avoidant partner suddenly re-engages, mirroring the same neurochemical response seen in gambling or substance use. Meanwhile, oxytocin, that bonding hormone, floods the anxious partner's system when they provide emotional caretaking. This reinforces the belief that love is something they have to work for. For the avoidant partner, withdrawal brings cortisol reduction, which creates a sense of relief that reinforces avoidance as a coping mechanism. This is why both partners feel stuck in their roles. You have to gain control over this cycle to manage it. How do I gain control? 3 ways. 1, start tracking with dopamine withdrawal symptoms. If you feel emotionally empty or restless when your partner pulls away, this is a sign of codependent reinforcement. Why am I feeling lonely and pulled away? Where is my partner? Is it because of their lack and their disconnection that I'm feeling this? Am I not getting my fix? Start tracking that carefully. Same way you might track sugar withdrawals. Number 2 is delay your response to any emotional triggers. By interrupting that instant need to chase, you can weaken the reinforcement loop. Even if you slowly give in and slowly feedback and change that over time, that's still an improvement over an instant reaction. You don't want that. And number 3, practice some physical grounding techniques to regulate your nervous system so that you don't rely on your partner's actions to calm your emotional state. The clients who come to me with anxious attachment and codependence tendencies, what I do is train them with body techniques first to manage their nervous system and be calm and regulated at those times. And that is groundbreaking and world shifting for them because they're now not waiting like a flower to be pollinated emotionally by somebody else. They can actually take care of their own emotional state. That transforms everything for them. Step 3, shift from external validation to internal security. The anxious partner's self-worth is often externally constructed, meaning that their ventral striatum, which processes rewards and validation, is overly dependent on external feedback. In contrast, the avoidant partner has conditioned their dorsal anterior cingulate cortex, which governs emotional suppression, to minimize their reliance on external validation. To break this imbalance, the anxious partner must rewire their brain to self-soothe, shifting away from external validation to internal security. Now, here's how you're going to break this imbalance. You're going to retrain the insula, your brain's self-awareness center, to recognize your needs before prioritizing your partner's. This means engaging activities that activate dopamine and serotonin independent of your relationship. It could be physical movement, dance, singing, art, hobbies that you enjoy, going for walks, spending time with other people, friends, family, creative pursuits, deep social connections, anything that gives you connection outside of this relationship. And then practice some self-regulation techniques like controlled breathing, vagus nerve stimulation, and mindfulness to prevent emotional spiraling. Control your downs, control your ups. Learn to manage the downs through body work and somatic body techniques. Learn to manage and create the ups so you're not waiting for that other person to take care of you. This stops a lot of the reason that you feel trapped in codependency, because now you're not reliant on that paycheck anymore. Step 4 then, as you're no longer reliant, is to set and enforce boundaries without any guilt. For the anxious partner, setting boundaries usually triggers cortisol spike because the brain interprets self-advocacy as a risk of rejection. You're going to lose the person who's taking care of you. The amygdala associates boundaries with emotional abandonment, which is why anxious individuals often over-explain, over-justify, or feel guilty whenever they assert their needs. A caregiver somewhere along the way punished them for these behaviors so significantly, they've learned never to do them again. For the avoidant partner, boundaries create a sense of safety as they regulate overwhelming emotional demands. However, they may initially resist when a previously codependent partner begins asserting more autonomy. Just be aware of that. So how do you set better boundaries without feeling overwhelmingly guilty? Here's what I teach my coaching clients. Number 1, expect an initial cortisol release when you first start asserting boundaries. This is just your brain adapting to the new structure. Understand, oh, that's my brain punishing me for having boundaries because when I was 1 year old, I got yelled at for saying no. That's fine. I can move past this. Then use clear, short, direct statements instead of any justifications. This minimizes your emotional distress and probably the other person's too. Number 3 is talk about capacity. I'm sorry, I don't have capacity to do that for you. This is my principle. This is my goal. I can't violate that. I still care about you, but I don't have capacity to do that for you. Or because these needs I have are not being met, I'm not mad at you. I'm just letting you know I can't do these additional things for you. If you'd like these things, I would love to give those to you, but here's what I would need to be able to do that. Do you agree to do that? Can we take care of each other? If you can build this, these are easy, healthy boundaries. And then track your heart rate and your nervous system response to boundary setting and practice tolerating discomfort without retreating into people pleasing. It's going to take some time. You're going to have to craft a resistance to this level of emotional pain and social pain. You are anticipating tremendous emotional and tremendous social pain at the same time. Those are parts in your brain that can feel those things. You're anticipating that agony. Practice it, work through it, understand it. Step number 5, really big one. It culminates with everything else we've talked about. Stop rewarding avoidant behaviors. Intermittent reinforcement teaches the avoidant partner the withdrawal is rewarded. When they pull away, the anxious partner overfunctions, proving that emotional distance leads to increased attention and effort. This creates a neurochemical cost-benefit analysis, reinforcing the avoidant tendencies over time, actually for both of them. So to the anxious partners out there, here's what you must do to stop rewarding that withdrawal. Disrupt the reward cycle. If they pull away, match their level of effort instead of overcompensating. Engage the prefrontal cortex to resist your impulsive emotional reactions. That means pause before responding to an avoidant person's withdrawal and stop chasing them reactively. Introduce some structured reconnection methods. Schedule check-ins to create predictable intimacy. Reduce the avoidant person's needs for withdrawal as a self-protection mechanism. We're going to get together on these nights of the week. These nights of the week, you're going to be on your own to have that space. Let's build it in. Tuesdays and Fridays, you're on your own. The other 5 nights, we're together. Great. Awesome. Let me know how that goes on your end when you take time to yourself. Is that enough? Too much? Let's talk about it. Let's have these check-ins as well. And if they do pull away, say, hey, I see it looks like you're in stress mode right now. It's okay, but I do want to reconnect with you when you're set. Can you give me an idea of when that might be? Very, very good to ask for when they're coming back. And a decent, healthy partner should give you that. Now, speaking of decent, healthy partners, step number 6, expect resistance and emotional pushback. When the anxious partner stops over-functioning, the avoidant partner's hypothalamus, which regulates emotional homeostasis, senses a disruption in the familiar dynamic. This can trigger emotional resistance, increased withdrawal, or even reactive behavior. They don't know why you're changing. They're concerned about why. They don't know what it means, and they're sensing a potential threat. For the anxious partner, the sudden shift in their role may cause dopamine withdrawal symptoms, creating an initial sense of emotional emptiness or panic. You might feel like you're about to be abandoned. You might feel like you are worthless. Why would anyone stay with me if I'm not? And then you have a laundry list of inappropriate behaviors you've been doing for the sake of the other person. Understand this level of emotional dysregulation in this process can happen even with good, loving partners who are just trapped in a bad cycle. So here's what you should do when you see the pushback. Recognize that pushback is a sign that your brain and theirs is rewiring. This discomfort is temporary. One thing you can do to get through it is use polyvagal techniques like deep breathing, cold exposure, grounding, somatic body techniques to regulate the nervous system distress and bring yourself down so your logical brain can re-engage. And then stick to some predefined boundaries without negotiating, and that prevents emotional whiplash. We've agreed on what things will be. We're pulling back. We're not going to give in now that we're scared. We're going to comfort ourselves, manage it, and get through. A healthy partner probably should be working with you during this process. Instead of fighting you tooth and nail, you shouldn't have to reprogram them like you're their parent. And that's ultimately what I want to call out here in step number 7. Redefine love as mutual, not conditional. Codependency teaches the brain that love must be earned through sacrifice, suffering, and over-functioning. This creates a deeply ingrained neural association between making secure relationships out of, well, pain and agony, which is not a secure relationship at all. This, in fact, then makes real secure relationships feel boring, unsafe, or unfulfilling at first, because you're not throwing your life away for the other person every single day. And for the avoidant person, commitment has been conditioned as a threat to their autonomy, making closeness feel suffocating rather than fulfilling. Both partners must reprogram their perception of love so it's no longer driven by these survival instincts and fear. Here's a couple ways to redefine love for yourself biologically. Engage in some self-reflection exercises that rewire the insula's connection with love. Maybe track some patterns of emotional labor in past relationships. Write down a list of behaviors you need from your partner or connections from them. Write down things you don't necessarily like that you continue doing or don't respect yourself for, or even disrespect yourself for, that you want to stop. And then shift your internal dialogue from "I need this person to love me" to "I need to feel steady in my relationships. I need to feel safe. I shouldn't need them. I should want them." And then introduce gradual exposure to more secure attachment. Intentionally seek relationships with family and friends that offer predictable emotional reciprocity rather than chaotic highs and lows. If you need to find a partner who can give you that security, even better. Now, when this last step is really implemented, the relationship will either transform into something healthy, balanced, and secure, or it will reveal that it was never meant to last. Either way, you are going to win, and when you follow the steps in order, you won't be devastated if that manipulative partner leaves you. Now, the real truth is that ending emotional codependency is not just about setting boundaries or trying to think differently. It's about rewiring your brain and nervous system to break free from the attachment patterns and biological chemicals that are keeping you addicted, that keep love tied to anxiety, struggle, and self-sacrifice. When these 7 steps in this video are followed, the anxious partner stops feeling like they have to prove their worth to be loved. The avoidant partner stops seeing connection as a threat to their autonomy. And together, they can build a relationship where love feels safe, mutual, and sustainable. This is how you end emotional codependency, not through willpower, but through rewiring the way that your brain understands love itself. Now, final warning here, and I need to put this warning on here because this is real. You need to look at the risk of losing the relationship versus losing yourself. When you stop the codependent behaviors, there is a very real possibility that the avoidant partner will leave rather than step up. This is not a failure. It is clarity. If someone only wants you when they can control the terms of closeness, that is not love. Breaking codependency is not about winning the avoidant partner. It's about reclaiming emotional freedom, stability, and self-worth. The anxious person must ask themselves, would I rather keep this cycle alive at the cost of my mental health, or face the discomfort of change and find real love, whether with them or with someone else? Now, if you're ready to break the cycle of codependency and build real emotional security, I am hosting a free live masterclass on YouTube Live where I'll go even deeper into how to rewire your attachment patterns and create healthier, stronger relationships. If you have questions or you need help, drop those questions in the comments below. My team and I will pick the top 10 most impactful questions to discuss live. So everybody get in there, upvote those questions down below that you like, tag the little thumbs up on them, or put your own questions in there to get the thumbs up and get upvoted. And those are the ones that my team and I will go through and pluck out and answer. Questions will only be taken from the comments to ensure that we address the most pressing needs directly. So if you want answers, drop your questions below. Last thought that I want to leave you with is this. Most people stay stuck in codependent relationships because they fear what will happen if they stop overgiving. But what's worse, losing an unhealthy relationship or losing yourself? Love should not be something you have to fight for every day just to feel worthy of it. It should be given to you because of who you are. The question isn't whether your relationship will survive breaking codependency. The question is, will you? Drop your questions below, and I'll see you in the live session.